fucking Sauron. I'm just kidding. We're not being watched.
And here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. Hopefully the microphones are working and it sounds a little less echoey than the last episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. I know you might be saying to yourself, especially if you're tuning in today while we're recording this, hold on, this isn't supposed to be an episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. This is supposed to be a roundtable, or at the very least, a call-in show. And you would be correct, or at least correct according to everything that's happened up until now. We also thought that that was correct until reality stepped in and went, no, that's not, that is not what's to be today. And so due to some Zoom issues or an act of what is, we are not having a call-in show or a roundtable. We are in fact just going to live stream this episode for a little while here and talk about that, and then hopefully get back to trying to correct the Zoom problem prior to our group on Patreon. Hello everyone on Patreon. We are going to do our best to correct this before that time. We do appreciate your patience and we appreciate your understanding. Welcome to Dualistic Unity Raw. As I said, wanted to start off with doubt and insecurity and fear. And all of that, because, you know, I feel old in some ways. Like, I'm approaching a half century. That's dawning on me more and more. Not that I feel old, like, oh my God, or, you know, bitching about those kids on my lawn or anything like that. But just noticing a lot of people in my life going through cycles that to them seem very extreme, to them seem very difficult. That's frankly just something I go through over breakfast now, you know, and in a way where I'm not like, well, I'm not so swept up in it. It's still happening. You know, like I just went and sat down by the water and went through, I don't know, a couple of decades of fears and insecurities, just sitting there by the water. It was beautiful and the sun felt really nice, and that was where the primary focus was. But every once in a while, I'd notice my attention kind of drift into the thoughts and into the stuff that was just kind of processing or operating in the background. And I've more or less just learned to, you know, you got to sit through that. You just got to sit through it and reconcile it and go, yeah, okay, I'm still insecure about that, you know, so I still have that doubt. So I still have that fear. I'm still worried about relaxing. And this could be anything. This could be, you know, how you deal with a relationship, how you deal with a choice in your life, how you deal with your fucking physical being, your posture even. I mean, you're sitting there right now possibly, and are you clenched up on one side? Are you trying to prop up your shoulder? Are you relaxed in your hips and in your legs? Are you relaxed evenly throughout the body? Or are you feeling some pain and trying to tense up another part of your body to compensate for that pain? How much are you trying to feel in control? And how much is it distorting your experience? How much is it causing suffering? How much is it causing conflict? And it's just important to just take a breath, you know, because I think one of the benefits of continuing to be here, rather than saying, I feel old, I just feel like I've been here fucking forever. One of the benefits of being here is that you start to realize that everything that at one point felt like the end of the fucking world never ended up being. And that the world, quote unquote, or your life is way more, I guess, durable than you're willing to give it credit. You can go through a lot of things, and at the time they're going to seem like a lot, but in hindsight you're going to go, nah. And I've been through other stuff like that too, because that's what the experience of continuing on is going, you know, ups and downs, going through the hills and the valleys, going through the hardships and the good times, and, you know, finding it easy, finding it hard, and that's it. It's just, that's life. That's life. And so I just wanted to say, you know, stop expecting it to be anything else. I think that's really what enlightenment is, and I've said this, that, you know, there is no enlightenment, because the idea of enlightenment is that there is this state where everything changes. And as much as that's true, it's only through accepting that everything is already changing, that it's always been changing. and that all we can do is just try to hold on, and that's what causes our pain and our suffering.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that feeling or assumptions about enlightenment, there's this sense of, or like, recognizing something or whatever it is, that when it comes to insecurity, self-doubt, all these things, that, it's the end of it. There is no more insecurity. There's no more self-doubt. There's no more, every choice that you make, it's going to feel good. Every decision you make, people appreciate it, every choice, whatever. And there's ways, and I think part of it, you can kind of get fixated on there being an end to those things. And if that's, an assumption, then there's going to be this belief that you can do something to get rid of them. And what if that's never the case? What if there is no way to overcome insecurity, self-doubt? What if that's going to be in potential every single day you wake up, even after, getting to that point? You've been working for a while and you're working your way up to getting promotions, and it's like, oh, if I just get to this point, if I just do this thing, if I just, go to this college or university or get this job, then this will be solved. If I just, think about myself in a certain way, if I just gain, a certain amount of followers on social media, anything, if I just, express certain things in certain ways, then this thing will be overcome. This internal insecurity that I have, where I don't feel like I'm quite enough unless I do this, then then it's solved, then it's done, then it's finalized. And maybe that isn't ever the case. Maybe there's never a point where that potential for insecurity is gone. There's nothing you can ever possibly do or say or express that gets rid of it. And, I think sometimes we can get caught up in thinking that, oh, we can overcome insecurity. And then you go do something new or try something new, and all of a sudden you're insecure as fuck. And you're, doubting yourself and your decisions. Or yesterday we were discussing choices we make and decisions that we make. And as much as, you can have certain choices and decisions that feel like exist in a vacuum when you're alone in your apartment, choosing to get up and go to the bathroom or not. It's like, okay, great. That's some basic ass decision making right there. But anything outside of that, and even that, has ripples. The choices that we make, they're not oftentimes easy. A lot of times, maybe there are decisions that we make that, there's more potential for insecurity to arise because it is a different thing that we're choosing. And that's okay. But if you live your life trying to not be insecure, that's a pretty insecure way to live your life. Like, that's arguably the most insecure way to live your life. And so maybe it isn't about not feeling insecurity, but it's the most secure thing you could do is be willing to make choices in which you have the potential to be insecure, to try something new, where insecurity has the potential to arise. Like, that's a quote unquote non-insecure decision. And in that effort to mitigate insecurity, you can act really fucking insecurely, and make choices that are coming from a deeper insecurity because of an unwillingness to admit that you're insecure, just like everyone else, just like everyone has the potential to be insecure or, doubt yourself. And there's times where you assume that things can be black and white, and if you express certain things or share certain things or do certain things or act certain ways or make one choice versus another, that you can get rid of it.
Oh, I've got a great example of this. and I think you're both going to appreciate this. So long ago, when I was on my way to the forest, I stopped in a city here on the island and was hanging around the city, just kind of chilling out, had a little bit of weed, went through walks through the park, that kind of thing. Ended up running into this person that I knew from a different city in a different province from fucking like 2 years before. Didn't know them well, had only run across them by their alias, which they insisted was their real name, Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver was covered in runes. He wore a cloak made of leather, and it was covered in mystic runes that were made to protect him. Runes.
What is a rune?
A rune is like it's like a form of writing, but it's an ancient symbol that was often used in like Norse mythology and stuff like that. So
Protection spells.
exactly.
Very enlightened.
So very specific and I guess powerful symbols. So he was covered in these in his cloak, and he was a traveler of the mystic realm, self-described. Ran into him. He's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Haven't seen you in forever." I'm like, "Good man, here you go, I took." So I passed the joint to him. He's like, "Oh, I got some." And so I'm like, "Oh, all right, cool." And he's like, "Yeah, let's go for a walk in the park." So we go for a walk in the park, and he pulls out this bag. And again, this was during Prohibition, so it wasn't legal at the time. But it was like 3 or 4 ounces of weed, like in this massive bag that was inside his massive cloak. And so he's telling me all about, being aware and self-responsible. He's telling me about being spiritual and about, all of his chakras being in alignment and the time that he felt enlightenment and all of that. And then he tells me where this bag of weed has come from. He was saying, "Oh yeah, so had nowhere to stay. Last week I ran into this guy." And he's like, "Hey, no problem, man. We had a great conversation. I just met him." He's like, "You can crash on my couch. It'll be great. I got some weed, so on and so forth." And so I crashed on his couch, and then I stole his weed because I felt afraid to do so, and I had to prove I'm not afraid of that. And so he took advantage of this person who offered to help him, stole that person's and a significant amount of weed during Prohibition, and then just fucked off and bragged about it as an act of enlightenment, as an act of being free, as an act that showed that he was moving on, that he was growing, that he was mature and enlightened. And do you hear how fucked up we can turn ourselves? We can really we can create gymnastics in our head and forget that we're doing something that is ultimately harmful because we're so caught in trying to prove something that means something about us that everybody else becomes just fucking scenery. They become just fucking scenery, just movable pieces on the board game of you. Right? How do you play into this? How do you play into this? How do you make me feel? How do I feel like you look at me? Everything becomes that. And it's all because you need to feel a certain way about yourself. And it's so easy to do. And we do it all the time in little ways. Sometimes it erupts. Sometimes you'll have a couple that seem perfectly happy until all of a sudden one of them loses their job and they no longer are proving that thing that they've been silently proving to themselves this whole time, and all of their insecurity rushes to the forefront. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden they don't have that role, they don't have that idea, they don't have that place in the world, and so everything else just falls out from underneath them, and suddenly they're lashing out, they're judging, they're maybe smacking their spouse around, they're going out and they're drinking, they're doing toxic shit, and all of a sudden you're just like, what the fuck? Where the hell did this all come from? And it came from that false certainty just falling out from underneath you, right? But we don't understand that we do stuff like that, where all of a sudden, we've been proving things to ourselves for so long that we forget that now we need to, and we do it all the time. But ultimately what we're saying is that there's a place where you realize you've only ever been trying to prove it to yourself. And when are you done? When are you done? When does that game end? Not just when have you proved it to yourself, but when do you get over needing to? Because that's where we get caught. Like, I haven't proved to myself yet that I'm lovable. Okay. But when are you going to get over needing to? Mm-hmm. Because that need to prove is insecurity. So perhaps the problem is not that you're not lovable, but that you're insecure. Perhaps the strategy that your brain has come up with doesn't actually make sense. It is actually clouded entirely by your fear and the need that's attached to it. And that's why I said early on in season 1, like one of the biggest reckonings for me in terms of quote unquote waking up was the realization that I was needy. I needed to feel like a good person. I needed to feel like I was doing the right thing. I needed to feel valuable. I needed to feel like I was in control and that I knew where I was going and I knew where I was coming from. I needed all of these things because without them, I had nothing except here and now. And that's the laughable part, because the except here and now is fucking everything. That's where life actually is. It's so funny. It's like, I can't have any of these things except life. And it's just like, it's just funny because all of the things that you want are short-lived. The feeling of being in control is only true until something contradicts you. The feeling of being loved is only true until somebody doesn't fucking like you. All of these things are dependent on living in a fucking bubble. And when you let go of those needs, what you're left with is your life, here and now. Not your opinion of it, because you'll notice that most of your need to have an opinion is also a result of fear. You want to know who you are and what this is and how to react to it. How should I feel about this and all that? It depends on how many assumptions you're making about what it's doing to your life. See? Because outside of needing to feel like you know what's going on, you really don't. Outside of needing to know what your potential is, you really don't. And you can't. And if you could just accept that, you would actually express it. You'd be here as yourself, being in the world, living your life, and getting a feel for what that means for the first time, rather than just running from one carrot to another, running from one stick to another. Because that's what we do in our head, right? That's what the need is. I need to be better. I need to not be worse. None of that's real. You're just you. Everything else is just a concept.
Yeah, that need to prove something is, you're really, really focused on that. And going back to insecurity, it's like proving something to yourself is an insecure action. To prove that you're not insecure, like when it's just about you, proving it to yourself and proving it to like the rest of the world that you're not this, you're one of the few who isn't insecure. And so you can, express anything, share anything. And I've absolutely, I've had, just as you were talking, there's been so many examples I could think of throughout my life where it was this feeling of stemming from insecurity and then needing to prove something. And whether it's, proving that I'm, I notice that I've had certain tendencies of being a certain type of person and then proving that I'm not, maybe gravitating towards, I always try to be a nice person, and notice that there's some manipulation there. So it's like, that's enough. You don't have to then prove that you're not a nice person, because then you're probably going to just be a fucking asshole. And then, but it's to prove just something to yourself in response. And it can be absolutely the same thing with thoughts. You have certain thoughts in your head, and you got to prove that, you don't take them seriously, or you don't care what someone may think of you. And so you feel like you have to express something or share something in order to prove something, which again is another very insecure action. It's absolutely the case, because then, you get really, really caught up in things like that, and there can be no regard for the potential impact, no sensitivity for the potential impact of that sense of, needing to prove something. It's like, maybe that's not the most important thing in the world. Maybe proving something to yourself isn't more important than life. It's like, of course it's not. Of course it's not when you take a step back and think like, what is this proving, and to who, and who the fuck cares? Like, who the fuck cares if you prove something or you don't? And I think this is where, something like OCD can come in. Like, oh, I gotta, if I do this, step on a crack, break your mom's back, don't step on a crack. It's like, oh, if you don't, then you're proving that you care about your mom by not stepping on the crack. And it's just in your head that these things are existing because, you take a step back and it's not just the thought so much. It's like, what the fuck? The crack has nothing to do with I don't know what my mom's doing right now,
Right.
and things like that. But
Love has nothing to do with crack.
sort of any type of crack. And and so, you can get really, really tied up, and, I, throughout my life, very much have been trying to prove something to someone else, which deep down has just been trying to prove something to myself. And, more recently in my life, I've had certain things where I felt like I just had to keep proving things, prove that, I had thoughts, insecurities in my head, and had to prove that it wasn't, I wasn't insecure about anything, and to prove that I'm not insecure about those things. And so I expressed some things that there was, no regard for anyone outside of me, anyone else's life or experience. And despite there being even acknowledgement of a potential impact, it's like, if you're trying to prove something to yourself, then there just isn't nearly going to be as much sensitivity to potential impacts. And you can get so self-absorbed that you can see potential impacts and still not even take them in, because you have become the most important thing to yourself. And it's everything that, our whole podcast discussed, like the antithesis of everything our whole podcast discusses is that you don't have to prove anything. You're okay as you are. Like, all the things that you think are, all your insecurities, all your doubts, all your focuses, all your insecurities, be it physical, be it emotional, be it how you say things, what other insecurities you have, like, they're all very personal, and you don't have to even express them, outwardly, specifically, like being insecure. You can just understand that, yeah, of course I have insecurity, with physical appearance, like my ears. I always saw them as pointy, got called elf ears when I was younger. It's like, that was an insecurity for a long time. And then it hit me, that's not going to change. I'm trying to do something about it. It's like, it is what it is. It's like, yeah, sure, be insecure about that. I'm usually the only person who even notices those things. And, that can go in a lot of different directions, but the only person you're ever trying to prove anything to is yourself. And that isn't something you have to do. You don't have to prove anything to anyone else. You don't have to prove anything to yourself. You can just be who you are, what you are. There aren't additional things you have to do, because there's no way to get rid of insecurity. There's no way to get rid of the self-doubt anyway. And so you don't have to outwardly, express so many things, assuming that, oh, if I just do this, then I'll get rid of, insecure thoughts forever, doubts forever, insecure things, period. I'll overcome insecurity. And if, that's never going to be the case, then there isn't additional things that you have to do. And you can just, you can pay attention and not take, your assumptions so seriously about what you in a vacuum have to do in order to prove that, you're not insecure about something, because there is no way to get rid of that. It's always there in potential.
Yeah. And if you're looking at it though, you have another choice, right? Like what you're talking about in terms of like I got so caught up in my need to prove something that I fucking hurt somebody and said something I didn't mean. Welcome to most Thanksgiving dinners with the fam. Where somebody got drunk and they beefed off about somebody else's life choices. What do you think the person's doing there? They're getting so caught up in their own need to prove or validate themselves that they're lashing out at somebody and hurting them and not even aware that they're doing it. They'll actually say like, well, I'm just doing it for their best interest. Like, it's like, no, you're not at all. And they're continuing to get caught up in the idea, in the need to be right, the need to be valuable, the need to know. All of these things are needs. And people do this every fucking day just because they're not willing to admit that they do it. That's the only reason that they keep getting caught is because they're not willing to go, yep, I do that, and not judge themselves for it. But to actually be watchful. To be watchful. That's the thing. Like, conversations to me, when I'm speaking, I'm being as authentic as I can. But I'm also listening to where I react to things. I'm listening to where little things like trigger, emotions, and they trigger responses and they trigger thoughts and doubts. And that's interesting. But that's all you can do is just be watchful. Because as you said earlier, that's enough. Taking in the information that you've just acted insecurely changes what you do next time, because your brain went, right, and I know that's not helping me anymore. See, that's the thing. Once you start watching for your insecurity, it's because you've realized, oh yeah, that's there, and fighting it's not helping. So the brain treats it differently. It treats the information differently, because now you see it as valuable to recognize your insecurity, not an act of failure, not an act of weakness. You see it as, oh shit, accepting my insecurities actually courage. Damn, right? Because we have this overly simplistic idea that courage is the absence of fear, despite knowing that there are numerous quotes that say the opposite.
It's not the absence of fear as much as action despite it. Like confidence. I think I used this example early on in one of our seasons, but thinking of confidence like a building. I probably heard this from somewhere else or read about it, not sure who. But if confidence is a building and every action that you take is a brick to that building, action that you take, no matter how afraid you are, and not to prove anything, but just recognizing like, yeah, the fear can be there, the insecurity can be there. If anything, we want to talk about like connection and empathy. It's being willing to admit that, yeah, you're insecure, I'm insecure, I'm afraid, like all the time of all different sorts of things. And that's okay. Like we don't have to not be afraid, like this striving for like, ultimate potential, highest self, that we can, you can get caught up. I've certainly gotten caught up plenty of times throughout my life where I thought that was, the complete absence of insecurity and fear. Like I get to a point where I'm at a bar and I don't have butterflies in my stomach when I see someone that I want to talk to, and have a choice to do it or not to. And it's like, what would that experience be like if you never had any doubt? Like, is the lack of fear or lack of doubt, what is that indicative of? A lot of times it can be just indicative of like a numbness to life. Like the fear and the insecurity can be indicative of sensitivity to things, like actually feeling, the fullness of the spectrum, and seeing that it's a way to connect to everyone, see that, everyone has those things. And so certainly not running from them, but just being able to look past them, not thinking that you got to do something to prove that you're not insecure or afraid, but just waking up every day. Maybe you get a moment of insecurity or fear and just being like, okay, yeah, that's there. And then doing something else and then living your life, despite those feelings. But it's certain, if it becomes a focus to get rid of, then start spinning in circles, basically, because there is a way out of that, or you're just going to live your life in the same way every single day, so you avoid trying new things or doing new things or jumping into new stuff because you don't want to feel that insecurity. It's like you can kind of create a life that feels very much the same every day to mitigate that, but that's an insecure way to live, trying to just repeat and avoid insecurity or not jump into new things.
Yeah, just the phrase, I'm trying to prove something. It's like you don't need to prove what's already happening. And in fact, when you realize what's happening, there's no need to prove it. So when I think about times where I tried to prove where I wasn't insecure, that was in a moment of insecurity. So I was trying to prove, AKA pretend, that I wasn't insecure. And so that's why I have to prove that I'm not insecure. I have to prove that I'm not angry while I'm angry. And it's like, are you though? Usually you don't prove what's happening. You try to prove what you want to pretend is happening despite it not. And so when I'm relaxed, there is no need to prove I'm relaxed. So just that phrasing, it's like if I'm trying to prove something, it's probably what isn't happening, but what I would hope, what I want, what I think should be happening. And so I try to prove that. And really, like I just said, it's just another word for pretend. I usually will pretend something is a certain way as I try to prove it is that way. But you don't ever prove what is just happening. There's no need. I'm relaxed. What do I need to prove it for? So I just thought that was where my mind went when we were just chatting about that. Just if you're trying to prove it, you're most likely pretending. And there's no need, because just seeing that it's happening, you're like, okay, that's happening. I don't like it, but it's happening. In my opinion, it's there. But again, that doesn't have to be the focus. That doesn't have to be the priority. That doesn't mean anything because I have an opinion about something, and I haven't, been communicating everything that I've been feeling because I thought that, that was quote unquote my problem. My feelings are my problem. And it's like, yeah, that is one perspective. That is one context to think about life in. But, people experience the ripples of my feelings. So although my feelings are my problem, my feelings are my problem, that doesn't dismiss the fact that other people still experience of my feelings and my choices. And so I was thinking about the movie A Beautiful Mind. And I was having a chat with a friend earlier today, and I brought up that movie, and I just was thinking about how there's a point in that movie where they talk about making the best choice, or the perfect choice. I'm paraphrasing. I would say watch the movie. Don't just take my summary or paraphrase. But in the movie, they're saying, how do you make the best choice? The best, and it's like, to some degree, they said that the best choice is the choice that is the best for me and for the we. And it's because, every choice ripples. And as much as you think that your choices are only about you, they still impact other people, and other people's choices impact you. And although, they are responsible and accountable for their choices, that doesn't dismiss the fact that our choices ripple, every single one. And so when you are making a choice, or when I'm making a choice or thinking about that, it's like, I'm not just thinking what makes sense in the context of me. I think what makes sense in the context of us, because we're all in this together, and we're all here, and we're all connected. And so, making choices isn't just in one context. But when I think about one specific context, that is very black and white. And so when I'm making a choice, it's not, oh, does this make sense as a business? Does this make sense as a friend? Does this make sense as a fellow human? Does this make sense as existence? It's like, does it make sense in multiple contexts? And it doesn't have to be that you think about every single context within every choice, but you think about relevant context. And usually it's more than just one, singularly one, And so that's what I think about. Like, there are layers to this experience, and there are layers to our decision making. There are layers to everything. It's never just one thing. It's not just what it seems. It's not just my opinion. It's not just not that. And so life is very gray. And so my description right now maybe didn't make any sense to anyone, but it feels like it's touching upon multiple things, and in touching upon multiple things, it's talking about everything and nothing in particular. And so chew on that, motherfucker.
Absolutely, and I think the sensitivity, and the context, and seeing that, like, each choice, there are a multitude of things that it's never going to be like, oh, this is the right choice, best choice. Everyone's gonna, I'll feel good about this, and everyone else is gonna feel good about this all the time. And like, but if you're focused on yourself, then that's all you see. It's really hard to see, all of the context, like all of the layers of that context. It's like you're just looking at yourself and what you think is the best thing to do based on yourself. But if that isn't the case, you're going to be able to see, and that's one of the benefits of not just wholeheartedly focus on you and how you're doing and trying to prove something, is that you can see more of the context. You can see that there's ripples made, and the beautiful mind with, I think it's Nash equilibrium that they came to, was the willingness to take a step back and be like, no, there's something that we can all come to here, like a conclusion that can be made that does take in more considerations.
A win-win.
A win-win situation. And I think the alternative is where competition comes in. And it's like, may the best man win.
Only one winner.
Yeah, that's it. And everyone else is a loser. If you ain't first, you're last. Think about it. How are we doing? Big bag of Jesus. Yeah, I would really like to be first here. And it's because
in a race by yourself.
Straight up. And it's
hard.
like, because you get to the end of that, and it's like, that doesn't feel
the only one standing up on the podium.
Exactly. Like, who's that feel good for? Yeah. Like they're giving me the medal, and then what? You go hang it in your house, and like, how's that experience actually feel when you're left with yourself? Like, are you feeling more relaxed, more at ease, or do you just feel good about yourself because you did something and proved something, and proved it to who and why, and just to someone else who or who are you looking good for? Like someone else who wants to just be alone in that accomplishment, or getting really what you want or what they want. Like, letting go of what you want, it's not this like massive achievement. It's just, it doesn't, you do that enough and you realize, oh, that's a very lonely experience. That's a very separate experience. It's a low feeling sort of thing, getting what you want, but then to your sense of, I don't know, yourself, call it ego, whatever, it feels like a hit because your ego's alone. Your ego is always going to be alone. And so if that's the focus, if yourself is the focus, if that sort of vacuum experience when you're making choices is the focus, the feelings you're going to get are alone, separate. It's not connected whatsoever. And so that sense of what you personally want, your personal opinion, or your personal preference, there's a side that feels like you're letting go of something if you don't hold on to those things. But you take a step back, and it's like, if that's the input, that's going to be the output. If the input is doing it exactly what you want all the time, you're going to be alone, because those are choices. When you only consider yourself, that's what you're going to get in response. It's like, it's not a very complex thing even, but there's a side where I feel like this is the first time I'm talking about this, where it actually makes sense. And it's like, of course, if that's your input, then your output is going to be a lonely experience. You're going to feel alone. And if the inputs aren't as focused on you personally, and it's more like with a beautiful mind, that natural equilibrium, like hold on, well, what's maybe best for something outside of that, the response, you're not going to feel as separate, as alone. And you can't really, no matter how good you want to feel about yourself, you can't mitigate that input output experience, and your personal wants and preferences and opinions is that input. And yeah, there's going to be outputs that are your feelings in response to those choices that you're making.
Yeah, and this oddly enough ties in very well to we had a question on the live stream, because of course this is Dualistic Unity Raw, so people can still ask questions in the comment section despite not being able to call in. The question is, how do I enjoy orgasms more? And this comes down to the exact same thing. Stop trying to. Really, like, let go of the need to even finish, right? Get into the minutiae or the minutiae.
The nuance.
The nuance, get into the tiny little feelings. Stop trying to get somewhere, is what I mean, because you'll notice that the more you're trying to get somewhere, the less you're enjoying it, because you have this ideal in your head that you need to get to. But that makes the reality that you're experiencing suck, because it's not the ideal. And so your brain does the comparison thing. But if you can let go of the comparison, if you can let go of the trajectory, the need, the end result that you want, you'll find the experience that you're having deepens.
Mm-hmm.
And you will enjoy your orgasms more. Hell, you don't even need to orgasm. You'll just enjoy.
Yes.
Yes. You'll just enjoy. You know, that's the whole point. It's not ultimately to get to the end, because now you've achieved something. You've really enjoyed yourself. You orgasmed.
This question is a setup. How can I enjoy orgasms more? Automatically, you're saying that you're enjoying them less than you could be. Now there's a should. Now you've made sex into work. Are you working quarters? Because I could have swore sex is an expression of just attention, time and attention.
But no judgment either way.
Well, it sounds like someone's
You
judging
can
it.
still-
The judging's in the question.
If you are, out there doing this as work, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it more. You can still get into the experience.
Absolutely. Everybody there, you can enjoy and resent any profession. That's on the table. Because it's up to you. You are your experience. And so it's like your choices reflect simply priorities. And we don't like that. We think that our choices mean what we say that they mean, instead of reflecting what we're prioritizing in that moment. And you can't have it both ways. You can't make choices and then decide what those choices mean, and then and dismiss what those choices are reflecting. They're reflecting what you're prioritizing. You don't like how the ripples are coming out of those choices? Well, then take a look at where those choices are coming from. It's not that difficult. Or it's not as the expression I grew up with, it's not rocket science. It's not this difficult equation. You don't have to go get a degree to understand that choices reflect priorities. And that's why I loved having that little postcard on my wall that was like, you can't hide priorities. People can tell you whatever they want. You can tell yourself whatever you want. But if you take a look, you can see what the priority is. And so you don't need someone to tell you. You don't need to tell yourself. You can just look. And you can see what the priority is. And then from that, you can adjust without taking your opinion seriously of what that choice was or what the priority was. The priority is what it is.
I think that's the problem, though, right? Or not the problem, but I think that's the reason that it's so easy to get into thought and not second guess it, because to you, you're putting yourself first. That's the priority, to be better, to be your optimal self, right? To be the right person, to do the right thing. And so you think that that's your priority, not realizing that your priority there is you above all else.
And it's just being a concept. If you're saying that, your priority is to be the best self, then you're just being a concept.
The problem there is, if it's not me above all else, if I'm not thinking about myself and where I'm going and what I'm doing, how people are perceiving me and all that, anything could happen. And that's where we get all wobbly, because we don't understand that's true regardless of the thoughts. Anything can still happen.
Yes.
The only thing is that you're actually blinding yourself to the anything that is happening. by focusing on the anythings that you want to happen or fear to happen.
It's not even anything, it's that it's a specific thing. It's that anything could happen. It's like my worst fear could happen.
Oh, not just one
Like,
though. There's
but
like
anything like
infinite fears, because it's fear can happen. Whatever I fear could happen, and you'll go through a myriad of fears throughout your entire life. Things that you didn't even think you were afraid of, you become afraid of over time if you fixate on them. Right? And so I think it's just, it helps to remember that we talk about faith all the time, and we talk about just moving forward. And I said early on that, you know, for me, my intentions not to really get anywhere or be anything or anything else. I just don't intend to do harm. And the trick to that, especially, is I don't want to not do harm because it means that I'm a good person if I'm not harming people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do harm because I don't like being harmed. You know? And
You
I
don't
know
need to.
what that feels like. Like, I understand suffering. I'm aware of what insecurity is like and how hard it is to be alive. Like, to me, I just don't want to add that to someone else in the same way I wouldn't want somebody to add that to me. That empathy there guides me. It changes my life. It changes my choices. It changes how I interact with things. And what it's done is it's led me to a way of living in the world that I never thought was possible. But I never thought it was possible because it wasn't within the sphere of the thoughts I wanted or feared. See, that's the whole thing, is that you can't see your way to fulfillment because you can't be fulfilled and be the needy thing that you are currently perpetuating.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let go of the need, and then fulfillment finds you. So I just wanted to mention that quickly. I know we're coming up to the end of the episode here because we are going to sign off a little early and try to address our ongoing Zoom problems. But I just wanted to say this has been a fantastic conversation. It's always nice to come back to this. Something Andrew said earlier, you know, I feel like I'm just coming to this like for the first time. And I've laughed numerous times over 6 seasons at how often that has been said, because of how often I've said it myself before we ever started this podcast. All that's really changed over time is that I'll go through this cycle, for example, where I'll be like, oh my God, I'm insecure, you know, and I'll lash out a little bit, and then I'll realize I'm lashing out, and then I'll go, oh my God, I'm insecure, and I have to deal with that, and I'll deal with my insecurity, and then all of a sudden my life will find it I'll find equilibrium in my life. I'll feel, you know, like I'm in alignment, I'm clear, I'm thinking, I'm in relationships, and then all of a sudden, boom, insecurity comes along again, and I go, oh fuck, and I react to it, and then it's like, oh right, I'm insecure, and so there's this ongoing cycle of just going through it until you recognize, like, yeah, you can feel really good and be clear and still have insecurity there as an option all the time. It doesn't mean anything about you. It's just another option. It's just another spectrum of thought. That's the whole thing. And it's always connected to the idea of you. Insecurity is always connected to the idea of you, and what remains in thought without the idea of you being predominantly the focus is the thought about everything. That's what we're talking about in terms of insight. The reason that two things fit together suddenly is because you're no longer standing between them going, that doesn't make me feel good.
Because the thoughts, you know, the desire and the fear, the wants, the needs, they all come from the same place. And so if you're always doing what you want, like, the fear is going to come with you every step of the way. And then you're going to continue to be afraid of all the things that are coming from the same spot because you're focused on yourself in silo, and they kind of go together. And so and it's not to say to get rid of fear or to let go of fear, but for that to not be such a priority all the time, it's like you can't have one without the other. You kind of have to let go of focusing on, you know, the individual siloed, I want this, period, end of story, my way or the highway sort of mentality, because with that comes, you know, the potential for fears to always be circling. And that's where, you know, the thoughts can sit, is like, I want this, I fear this, I'm afraid of this, so I want this in response to this. And there is, as we've discussed, experience where it's just not focusing on that so much, what's actually happening, and making your best choices based on what's actually going on, instead of personal fears, desires, concerns that are all about yourself. And there's more to consider. And when there is more being considered and those choices made based on, more of those considerations, like there isn't as much of the pull from the other side of things. But as long as, every choice that you make is because you want it or you got to prove something, it's like the fears are going to be right there next to them every step of the way. And so that being your guiding light carries all of that with. And it's not to say they go away if you don't prioritize that as much, but they're at least not right there all the time, because you're not looking at, the same sort of avenue. You're not looking at the same street, because they exist on the same street, the same track, on a train track. And there's another set of tracks that it's not about you. So it's not about what you want in silo, but that also, doesn't come with as much of the personal fear so much, because when the focus is on yourself and you proving something, you can get really caught up and potentially hurt a lot of people that you care about, because you don't want to look past yourself, but it doesn't get you to the place that you want it to. Following those, your personal wants in silo doesn't get you to the place that you assume that it might. It's like it doesn't help you feel better about anything. It doesn't solve anything. And so it isn't something that has to be focused on. Be insecure, be afraid. It's okay. It doesn't have to be something that's overcome, because it can't be. It's never going to be something that's overcome, no matter how much you go through, how much you experience. It's kind of a part of the human experience. And I'm insecure all the time. And that's okay.
And that's the only way you'll ever overcome insecurity, is to make it your friend. Is to look at it as something that informs you, that has sometimes driven you, sometimes held you back, but ultimately teaches you about the life that we're all experiencing. It's not an enemy. It's a part of us. And it's not something to be fought. It's not something to be escaped. And as long as it is either of those things, then it's just going to fucking wreck your life. It's going to pummel you until you just surrender and let it be. Stop making it about you.
And on that note, we are going to pivot and wrap up this DU Raw that came unexpectedly, but well timed. And so thank you for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Everyone.